politics are absolutely inescapable. Every aspect of our lives is political. And so I have been very adamant about bands and artists using their platform for good and spreading good messages for human rights, for example, which is also a very political topic. Today, we're going to talk about artists making political statements, especially on stage. It's going to be an interesting talk. I am Kiki, your co-host. My pronouns are she, her. Welcome to the Bleeding Metal podcast. Today, I'm joined by my co-host.
Hi, my name is Suzana. My pronouns are also she, her. Hello.
And we have a very special guest.
Hey, my name is Simon. I'm the lead vocalist of Defocus, and I'm very pleased to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. Tell us first a little bit about Defocus for the people out there who don't know your band. Where are you from? What kind of music do you do? I was just telling Susanna, I saw you on Friday at Euroblast Festival for the second time. And I enjoy it every time I get the chance to see you live. But there are people out there, of course, that don't know you just yet.
We are a modern metalcore band from southern Germany. And yeah, we've been playing Euroblast last weekend. It was a blast, to be honest. We had so many great shows this year, but Euroblast was definitely one of the best ones because people were going crazy, and it was a perfect way to shape up this whole festival season for this year. You just were there. It was a party, not only for us, so for all the other bands as well. Yeah, I guess to introduce somebody to Defocus, it's quite hard to tell, because nowadays music is everything in every kind of shape. But for me, I would say it's a very good mixture out of everything that you can imagine when it comes to music, mixed with some rough and heavy metalcore.
And your music videos are also really interesting. We're going to link some of them in the description. But what has impacted us, not only me, but my podcast colleagues as well, the most is how open you talk about political stuff on stage. We were just talking about Euroblast last Friday, right there. And then it felt so natural for you to be spreading good messages and to call the attention of people to all of these important topics. And as you were saying, yes, it's a party, and we go to festivals to celebrate, to have a good time and enjoy music. And it's also a little bit of escapism of the world we live in. But at the same time, we live in this world and we should strive to keep it alive. So it's also important that we talk about that stuff. And I really respect and admire the fact that you use the literal platform, the literal stage that you have to spread those kinds of messages. Was it a discussion you had internally in the band? Is it okay if I speak about these things in between our songs or something?
That's an interesting question, because we had that discussion years before, and some former bandmates were also having this opinion about music is not political. And we were just like, what the hell? No, music is every kind of art that you can find on this planet is political, because at least the person that created this art has a political opinion, right? So even though you probably not put a statement into your song, it's still about the person that makes the music. And so therefore you could never separate the political opinions of a person from the art that the person makes. And so therefore, besides that, we never had a discussion about this. So we're all okay with making political statements, and not only okay, for us, it's a very important thing to actually use the stage that we get as a band, to use it as a political platform, because we all want to just have fun when we are at a concert, and some of the people that attend it just don't want to hear anything about politics. I totally get that, to be honest. But at the same time, it's just so important for us to just use what we can do, especially in times like today where everything's going downwards or to the right side. It's a very frightening thing what goes up on this planet right now. Therefore, I think it's more and more important to actually use the stage that you have for making statements And at the same time, it certainly feels to me that you should also use it, because some people just don't think about things that happen on this planet, which is totally fine. I don't think that everybody needs to be involved into politics. But the problem is that everybody needs to have an opinion nowadays. The first time I realized that was during the COVID pandemics. Everybody needed to have an opinion from day one. It didn't matter from which part of society you came from. You needed to have an opinion, whether you like it or not. Nowadays, you're forced to have an opinion. And so I don't want to polarize people with what I'm saying. I just want to make them aware of what's happening and what's going on this planet right now. Therefore, I think it's something we need to do as a band, especially as we got the platform for this. And we never had a discussion about that. I never thought that I have to discuss about any statement that I'm going to make, because my bandmates know what my political position is. I guess we're all on the same page right there.
That's really good.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you how personal and natural it is for you to be on stage making political statements. I think you started talking about that a little bit there. Or how planned or not it is. Do you talk on stage about the things that are in your heart, things that you want to vent or even rant about, things that you're worried about at the moment? Or do you plan it a little bit? Maybe it's something that is in the news, or maybe it's something that relates to where you are playing at that moment. How planned or not is it?
I would say it's about 50-50, because I just don't want to get into this kind of motion where I'm talking and I don't know where to get with my point. So I'm always trying to make something clear, and I want to make a statement. And so I try to get a red line for myself. Okay, this is what I want to say. This is what I want the people to know. But at the same time, it's all about spontaneous interpretations for me. So I just barely know what I'm going to say, and then I'm just going to put it into words on stage. For example, at the Euroblast, the statement that I wanted to make was actually a lot longer, but the laptop didn't allow me to make the statement as long as I wanted to. I need to be very spontaneous about that sometimes. So it's 50-50 for me.
So you definitely put a lot of thought into it. That's really nice. I've been curious as well about your personal relationship with politics. Have you always been interested in it? Did it come from your family? Or when was the first time you recognized it is important? How did all these interests start to come up?
I actually grew up without having to care about politics that much. So I don't want to say I'm blessed with that, because at the same time, it's very important to actually be aware of things that happen. But for me, it was a very intrinsic motivation, which actually started back in 2014, because there was like the Crimea thing going on back then. And I can remember that there was in the news that one statement which said, yeah, now the Crimea is Russian territory on the Google Maps or in Apple Maps. And I was just like, wow, okay, that's wild. There's actually a war going on right now. And this is where I got interested in this, because it felt like so weird that nowadays nations still try to push borders. And this is the point where I actually started being interested in that. And of course, it was 10 years before. So I was at a different stage in my life 10 years before. But this is where everything started. And it just got more intense with everything that happened from 2015 to 2019 to 2021, with everything that added up on each other. So I'm very interested in politics. Therefore, I just need to know what's going on this planet. And at the same time, I never had to before, so I just did it by my own interest.
You have two very good points. One that I can also relate a lot to is the fact that there's war going on in the world and we don't always know it, because it happens, it has been happening all the time. What you just mentioned about the map and the borders changing, it's something that I remember back from my childhood. I come from Ecuador. Suzana comes from and lives in Brazil. And the first map of Ecuador that I saw in school, our border reached all the way to Brazil. A few years later, in the 90s, Ecuador had war with Peru, and they took a third of our territory. And since then, we are separated from Brazil. And that is something that I think also shaped my vision of the world, because I lived in the capital. And so it was far away from the border where all of this was happening. But I remember seeing that in the news. I don't think that shaped my upbringing or my interest in politics. I didn't get interested in politics until late into my 20s, but it was just something that I still remember. And I do remember this cultural thing about Ecuadorians not getting along with Peruvians because of the war from back then. There's this social prejudice against people from Peru, and it's so weird, unfair, and stupid. But at the same time, it's funny to realize where it comes from. And at some point in primary school, we had to learn the new map of Ecuador. And it felt so crazy to know, war is still happening. And as you were saying, I think it's also a little bit on the media, on sometimes irresponsible media, how we learn these news, how we learn when new wars start, and how our focus shifts to that. If we think just from the past few years, how our focus shifted from the invasion in Ukraine, which you as Defocus were very vocal about and still are, towards the Middle East, as if the other wars or the other conflicts had stopped. And it's not like that. And meanwhile, there are also all over the world other wars that are happening with many different political and financial interests, which no one in Central Europe or in North America is really paying attention to. And it's just so painful for me to know that.
First of all, it's crazy actually what you told about the war in Ecuador. I never knew about this conflict in specific, but when you're confronted with something that actually directly affects your homeland, it's a lot. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine, because I was born after 1990 when Germany was reunited. Therefore, I never experienced any part of this conflict, which makes it hard to relate for me. But it needs to be such a frightening thing if you know that there's a war actually going on right now in your own country, even though it's probably at the other side of the country and you could never be a part of it directly. But it needs to be so horrifying, to be honest. Mm-hmm. The second thing that I wanted to say is, you mentioned that there are lots of conflicts that are parallel and they are just still ongoing. And at the same time, the media kind of barely talk about all of them. So as you said, the Ukraine war is going on. Then the Gaza conflict escalates again and nobody's talking about Ukraine again. But at the same time, it's still a war and there's still a lot of people dying each day. I don't want to blame the media for that. I don't know about how they are actually structured. But for me, it's just hard to tell because the media is a very important thing when it comes to politics nowadays. So you got a lot of power with what you put into the media, like in the television or the news or whatever. And so it should be a lot more diverse to tell about all the opinions and at the same time about all the conflicts that there are. For example, the China-Taiwan conflict is currently not that present in the media, and there is a lot going on over there. Japan and China are currently on a very frightening path than South and North Korea. I don't know what they do, but it's not funny. A friend of mine was in China just a few months before, and he just sent me the Chinese Google map, which actually had the whole southern Chinese Sea, including Taiwan, as their own territory already, which made me think it could be within a few days that they just start this and we have a new conflict. And who's going to talk about the war in Ukraine or in Lebanon or in Gaza or wherever? Who's going to talk about that then anymore? Is it then, okay, China's more important than Russia, or who's going to decide which of the conflicts are going to be more present in the media? I think that this is a very important thing to mention because it's sad, but people only know about that when it's in the direct media, like in the television. Just imagine how many elder people there are in society that only watch television and only have this one source where they get their information from. And when there's a new war, the older war are not interesting anymore. So they don't give a shit. And so therefore, it's just important to know that there is a conflict basically anywhere on this planet right now. And that all of them need to be put in the spotlight, because this is the only way that you can help people over there that are suffering. and are losing family members each day. And this is something I really hate about the way that news are brought to people nowadays, that it's very selected and it's hard to get the full picture of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. That brings me back to the other point that you were mentioning before about how you had to actively get informed and how you want people to be aware as well, because you're absolutely right. Each of us needs to form their own opinion, but being aware of everything that happens and that's happening around the world can be so difficult. And that is why we also have to be aware. At the end of the day, all the television channels, all of the news outlets, they are also companies and they are also interested in earning money. And they earn money when they bring you the most sensationalist headlines and the newest conflicts. And that is how they prioritize what they print or what they broadcast.
Yeah.
Now that we have the quote unquote power of social media in our hands, to actually get out of that bubble and actively research and get informed about the things that are happening in less broadcasted corners of the world, we should actually do that actively. And it can be exhausting and emotionally as well. I cannot count the times anymore where I have seen such heartbreaking videos. And to me, it feels so surreal to be here in Germany in my safety and see all the destruction and the devastation and the suffering of people from the comfort of my home while I have a tiny television in my hand. And that gives me like this protection shield while I can see how many people are actually dying and suffering so much. And it's not even on the other side of the world. It's just a few countries over.
It just occurred to me that we are all here talking from a place of privilege. We are safe, thank goodness. Our family is safe. We are all right. We have jobs. We have food. We are not under any threat. I am in Brazil right now, and Brazil hasn't been involved in any war in centuries. I see everything from afar. I was just in Finland a few months ago, and a guy from Finland asked me if I was reading news in Brazil about the war in Ukraine, because Russia is their neighbor. So it's news there every time Russia does anything. So he was asking me, like, do you even hear about Russia? Because you're so far away. And I get, yeah, I do hear about Russia, but I can only imagine how much of a bigger problem it is for you because it's your neighbor, not mine. But I think that it's a good thing that we have this position of privilege, because I think we are the ones who have to be outspoken about it. We have to be the ones talking about it. Maybe the people involved in conflict, that's not their priority, or they don't have the conditions even to be vocal, to be on stage, or to have a podcast to talk about it. So I don't know, maybe if we can turn the same privilege that gives us a little discomfort, because yes, we are very comfortable watching people suffering on a screen and we feel like we can't do nothing about it. But on the other hand, we do have everything needed to do something about it. Maybe we are the ones who are supposed to be more vocal about it. We have platforms to do so, right?
Yeah, it's sad, but at the same time, we are the ones that have the platform and the right to say what we want, actually. And in the countries where the war happens, there is basically no chance for doing so. Of course, you can protest and go on the streets or whatever, but at the end of the day, you don't know what happens when you do. For example, there have been some protesters in Russia that have just been put to jail just because they did. And yeah, we got the privilege to actually being able to talk about that stuff. And at the same time, it would be so much more important if people that are at least part of the country could also do so, but they can't. And if we do it on the podcast or on the stage when a band is playing and they just take 1 or 2 minutes between songs and just talk about those issues, you can just highlight them again. You can just make people think about it. And that's the most important part. That's what I wanted to say. I never want to polarize anybody to get my opinion because mine is the right. I don't know whether I'm right or not. It's just about putting the conflicts onto spotlight again because nobody's caring for them. I just wore a shirt which says Free Tibet because you know that there was a conflict as well a few decades before, but nobody knows that it has never been a part of China before. There was a war going on as well. So you can see that people just forget after a few decades. And I don't blame the people. I really don't, because they got their own problems and everything. So I don't blame them. I just think it's important to let them know that there has been a conflict, which is still going on, but there's no war happening right now. It's just important to keep that conflict alive, because it is still alive, but people just don't know about it.
Yeah. You mentioned a few, Simon, but I'm curious to know, what are the causes that you personally feel that are closer to your heart, that you want to talk about more? What are the things that touch you on a personal level?
Which of those conflicts are affecting me more than the others, or did I get that wrong?
You mentioned conflict and war, and we talked about it as well. But I don't know, there are so many things that we could talk about. For example, before we started recording, Kiki and I, we were talking about how we would like to talk about politics in pretty much every episode, because there's always something. And we do list some issues that we talk about in the podcast a lot. Some causes are closer to our hearts than others. So, for example, we talk about LGBTQ rights, we talk about feminism, and of course, those are important to us. And other things maybe we don't mention as much, but they are also important. Maybe for you, it's the same, that, I don't know, maybe war and conflict in Europe and in your neighborhood is more important than other issues. But I don't know, I wanted you to tell us what are the issues that you care about more, if there's any.
Yes, I got it correctly. The first thing that I really do care for is all of those conflicts that we basically already mentioned. At the same time, you talked about LGBTQ+, which is a big part of the conflict going on right now in society in general. So for me, you cannot really separate all those things, because in my mind, and you can totally have a different opinion on that, but for me, it feels like the split that goes through society has all of those kind of characters. If you, for example, take Germany, or you could even say Europe or the whole Western world right now, there's a big split going on between, I don't want to say left and right, because it's hard to put people into those categories anymore, but you can definitely see that there is a big split, which is provoked by polarizing parties. And it doesn't matter whether it's about war or conflicts that happen in different countries, or a war which happens within our society right now. For example, that LGBTQ people are not accepted by one part of the society, which is not because they hate gays or lesbians or whatever. It's just because they don't know it. And some people take their fear and put it into political action at the end of the day, which is why I have a hard time to separate those conflicts from each other. Because if you, for example, take the AfD, which is the right-wing party in Germany, they actually jump onto the exact same train, right? They try to polarize against LGBTQ+ communities. They also try to put their opinion about the wars into society, and at the same time about the refugee thing that is going on in Europe since basically 2015, as I remember. And there is a lot going on which is used to polarize people. It's probably just because I started being interested in politics since 10 years before, but it seemed to me that it is narrowing down since then, and everything's just getting more polarized. And I'm afraid, to be honest, that it's just going more and more to this direction, that people wouldn't even talk to each other anymore if they are from the other side, which doesn't exist at all, but they think that it is a thing. For example, if you talk about, I hate the word, but if you talk about the woke kind of thing, people put people together in a group, like support LGBTQ+ people and support refugee rights and support environmental change and actually try to work against it. But at the same time, this is just some kind of group that, I guess the word woke was even brought up by right-wing people in the States. So that's why I don't even want to use the word, but for scientific purposes, we can use it. I have a hard time using any of those words, because at the end of the day, there are also people that are part of the LGBTQ+ community that don't give a shit about the environmental change. Or there are people that want to help the refugees but don't want to help LGBTQ+ people. And I don't think that it's okay, but at the same time, it's their opinion. And so you cannot put a frame around that and say everybody that has at least one of those aspects that they care about, being part of this woke community, whatever. So there is a specific frame that people trying to bring up about certain parts of society, which actually don't even exist because human beings are so different, right? I probably think that us three will definitely have the same opinions about those three things that we just mentioned. But at the same time, we can have so many different opinions about other topics, which makes us unique. And so this is what you totally push away from all those topics if you put a frame around a person which says, yeah, you're this and you're that, which is just wrong. I hate the terms right and wrong, but this is definitely wrong to me.
Yeah. I was even reading about how this framing that you were talking about is sometimes even done on purpose by especially extremists in general. Even the word woke, which is a bad word, it became a bad word now. But even that word is used on purpose because it's like, if you're an extremist, you can call the quote unquote the other side. You call them woke. And the word itself doesn't mean anything really because it's not in the dictionary. It's not a scientific term. So people who like you, who are extremists like you, they can just, everything that I don't like, I'm going to fit in this little box of this word that you're using. And they are now the enemy. So it's even used on purpose to fuel polarization because now you can be polarized against anyone that you don't like because I just used this word that doesn't mean anything. You just create your own meaning in your head and then you can hate whoever you want. You're afraid to just because now they're the other side. But I agree with everything that you're saying that we can't separate sometimes different causes and different conflicts, and putting people in boxes are just crazy. And polarization is getting more and more extreme. We just had elections here in Brazil as well. And research after research shows that left and right are more and more separate. Even men and women are voting more different now. Young people and older people are being more separated as well in terms of voting and political ideologies. It's just crazy that I agree with you that it's not true. We are not that polarized when we look at ourselves as human beings. We're all going to have things in common. We're all going to have different opinions, but we're all not one side and another side. But it's very much done on purpose to separate us, to put us against one another. And in this topic of polarization, I wanted to ask you, are you afraid if polarization is getting worse? And you mentioned that you don't want to bring that to your concerts. You don't talk about politics on stage to polarize people. You mentioned that. But are you afraid that you're going to have people that just not going to go to your concerts anymore because they disagree absolutely with something that you said?
I don't give a shit about those people. If they, I'm sorry, but if they hate what I'm saying, then they're probably the wrong people to attend our concerts. I guess there are enough people that like what we're doing and what I'm saying or whatever. I don't think that this is something that I should care for. I mean, if you make a statement, then you need to live with the consequences, obviously. I am very scared of all the polarization that is going on right now, especially if you look at the whole election season, which is going on in the States right now. It's actually the first time that you can see Donald Trump not even trying to get some new voters. He just tries to make the split even worse, which is something different than the last election before. Therefore, you can see that it's really enforced by the right-wing people. And so they just want to make this split as big as they can. And the worst of it all is, I don't know whether you think that history ever replays again, but it feels like it does at some point in a different shape, which is going on in Europe right now. I've been talking about the AfD and other right-wing parties in Europe or the European Union. And you can really see that there is like an agenda that they have. So it's all about getting the lower middle class because they kind of stomp downwards on the people that even have less than them, but also at the same time can put their fists up against the people that have more than themselves. So this is a very important thing. If you're a right party, you want to get this specific part of society, which basically happened in Germany 100 years before, which was the exact same agenda that the Nazis with Hitler had. Right. So this is what they're trying to do right now. And it works out perfectly. Mm-hmm. They do a good job. It's sad, but true. It works out at the end of the day. And this really scares me because it feels like, okay, now we're voting in Germany next year. We had the elections for parts of Germany in the eastern part of Germany just a few weeks before. And it looks very dangerous right now. So yeah, I'm scared of all this polarization that happens because people stop talking to each other. As soon as they realize that you're pro-COVID, against COVID, as soon as they realize you're part of the pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, whatever, and then they just stop talking, which is the most dangerous thing that could happen to society, when people that have different opinions don't talk anymore. And we live in a democracy where actually this is the most important thing, that people with different opinions talk to each other. And if this stops, we have a big problem, because then only one side can win. And currently it looks like the right wings are the ones that benefit from that, and not the people that have a libertarian and open-minded mindset.
And to that point, what you were just saying before, which I obviously agree, the opinions of your audience should not limit the statements that you make on stage or through your social media or on behalf of your band. It's actually those people who would reject those statements and say that music is not political, the ones who need to hear those messages the most. Yeah, it's very difficult to bridge that gap that you were saying, to stay in dialogue, to keep the conversation going in a calm and open and relaxed way. I used to be just like you were describing. The moment I heard someone was an anti-vaxxer or whatever, I would have liked to just, I did it once actually, to just get up and leave, because I felt like it was a threat to my life. If someone was not vaccinated in the early times of the pandemic, as an immunocompromised person, I was like, okay, this is a threat to my life, the fact that they don't want to vaccinate. And in the same vein, when I have talked to people that are very religious about me being a bisexual woman, I was like, okay, this is also a threat to my safety. I need to leave. But when I feel safe and when I feel like I can speak about these things, it's really important that we still do, that we pick those battles. And it's all about picking battles, because there are so many things happening in this shit show of a world we live in right now. The environment, the world is burning everywhere, sometimes literally very, very sad, but we don't have all the energy. We don't all have all of the energy to fix all of those different workstations. We need to sometimes speak about one cause. It's absolutely understandable how you do things. I have two last questions to wrap up. We were just talking about fears and the fact that you're not afraid to scare people away, to put it in those words, with your messages on stage. But would you perform in countries with politics that you don't agree with? And would you still make those statements? Let's say in Russia, for example.
Besides the fact that the music of Defocus is banned from Spotify since the war started, which is kind of funny, I don't think that they would even invite us. But yes, so I would, if we would ever come to play in Russia, and I do not think that this will happen, so it's very easy to say for me right now. But it is important to also do those statements where people need to hear it the most, as you just said. As I said, I'm not polarizing people, so I'm just making people aware. So therefore, I'm not doing anything wrong. And at the same time, yeah, it could become scary if, I don't know, there's a black car which follows you after you had your show and something's happening. I don't know what. Yeah, it sounds scary to me, but it feels like, yeah, the people that need to hear it the most are the ones that never get to hear something like this. So it's hard to say yes or no, but yeah, at the end of the day, I probably would.
That's incredible. I love your answer. And on the same vein, what advice would you give to other bands? Would you advise bands in general to express their political opinions on stage? And if so, how?
I would say yes, but only if they feel comfortable with it, because music needs to be comfortable for everybody, right? So if you're on stage and you feel the need to say something, then say it. But if you feel, okay, it's not the day for me, then okay, then just leave it out there. Nobody's asking you to have a political statement on stage. It's more about you to use it. And of course, it's good if bands use their platform to actually make some statements like that. But you don't need to. You just do your thing. And if you feel comfortable with making statements with things that you care for, that's another thing. If you care for politics, you will either way, earlier or later, use your stage to make some statements. Therefore, I would say yes, do it. But as soon as it sounds natural and it feels natural to you, then go for it. Because you can't do anything wrong, but just don't polarize people because it's happening too much in this society right now. Just tell them what's going on without trying to get them into a certain direction.
To convince them. Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you so much for all the wise words and for all of your wisdom. And by the way, I absolutely loved, I will not leave this unsaid, the fact that you referred to the US as the States and not as America, because that happens
South
way too
Americans
much.
appreciate. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
South America and Central America exist.
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
and
they
also
do.
Mexico is part of North America. Yeah, I appreciate it. I get so mad when people say it like that. And so I thought I also have to appreciate when people say it the right way. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What is Defocus promoting right now? Hit us with all the plugs.
So we're actually promoting our tour that we're gonna be on in, oh my God, it starts in 2 weeks already. I don't feel prepared yet. So we're going on tour and it's gonna be exciting because we're gonna play so many great shows. The second thing is that we are about to write some new songs already. So everybody that wants to hear something new, just follow us on our journey. And yeah, we hope to see you on one of our shows. We're looking forward to see you.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much. That's our show. Thanks for listening. We will be back next week with another amazing episode. So don't forget to subscribe to the Bleeding Metal podcast wherever you're listening. And also on YouTube, because we have some new video interviews happening all there. Thank you so much, everyone, for this lovely conversation.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.